The first thing people notice when they drive into Silvercrest Valley is the quiet. Not the dead kind of quiet, but the kind that hums. Wind rolling through grapevines. Birds cutting across the sky. Sunlight spilling over acres of green like liquid gold. It looks untouched, timeless, almost sacred. That illusion didn't sit well with the Silvercrest Hills Homeowners Association. I'd owned the Vineyard for nearly 7 years by the time the HOA discovered me. 32 acres of old-growth vines, inherited from my grandfather, whose name still sat etched into the original irrigation stone near the creek. This land wasn't just property, it was legacy. It predated every stucco house, every manicured lawn, every beige mailbox that now dotted the surrounding hills. The HOA, on the other hand, was barely 5 years old. Their subdivision had popped up like so many other developers, bulldozed the lower hills, slapped together luxury homes, marketed rustic vineyard views, and sold the dream of country living without the inconvenience of actual country life. That's when the trouble started. It began with letters. The first one arrived on crisp white paper, embossed with the HOA's silver logo. Polite, almost friendly. Dear property occupant, it read, we've received concerns regarding unregulated agricultural activity adjacent to HOA-managed land. I laughed and tossed it on the kitchen counter. The second letter wasn't as polite, but this one cited unauthorized commercial operations, noise disturbances, and unsightly farming equipment visible from HOA properties. They demanded I attend a compliance meeting. I didn't get into visits. A woman in her late 40s, clipboard in hand, standing at the edge of my driveway like she owned it. Perfect hair, perfect smile, zero understanding of where she was. Karen, she said, without irony, HOA compliance director. I didn't invite her past the gate. She gestured behind her. We've had multiple complaints from residents. Your tractors operate before 8 a.m. That violates community standards. I stared at her, then at the sunrise over my vines. This is a working vineyard, I said. We start before the heat. She pursed her lips. Silvercrest Hills residents didn't move here to hear machinery. I shrugged. Then they shouldn't have moved next to a vineyard. Her smile vanished. Over the next few weeks, the harassment escalated, drones hovering over my fields. Photos taken from the ridge. Notices taped to my gate claiming I was encroaching on HOA easements. One even accused me of illegally diverting water. That one almost made me choke on my coffee. My family had owned the valley's water rights since 1948. But the real moment, the one that changed everything, came on a Tuesday morning. I was overseeing harvest prep when 3 police cruisers rolled up my dirt road. Lights on, sirens off, and Karen was riding shotgun in the first car. The officers stepped out carefully, hands resting near their belts, eyes scanning the vineyard like it was a crime scene. Karen got out last. She looked pleased. Officers, she said loudly. That's him. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked forward, calm but curious. One of the officers, a tall guy with sunburned arms and a tired expression, spoke first. Sir, we've had reports of unauthorized commercial activity, water diversion, and trespass onto HOA land. I raised an eyebrow. From who? Karen stepped forward. From the Silvercrest Hills HOA. He's been ignoring compliance notices for months. I glanced at her. You mean the letters telling me to stop farming my own land? She scoffed. This land falls within HOA oversight. The officer frowned. Ma'am, do you have documentation proving that? Karen handed him a thick folder, practically slamming it into his chest. MEPs, bylaws, zoning complaints, everything. The officer flipped through it slowly. Meanwhile, another officer walked toward the irrigation channel, crouching to inspect. This don't work. His expression shifted from suspicion to confusion. Hey, he called out. This irrigation system is old. Like really old. I smiled. That's because it predates your department, I said. Karen snapped her head toward me. Don't be smart. The first officer looked up. Sir, do you have permits for this operation? I nodded. County, state, federal. Want to see them? Karen laughed. Oh please, if you had permits, we'd know. I pulled a weathered leather folder from my truck. Inside were documents older than Karen's HOA land deeds. Water rights, agricultural exemptions, valley ownership records. The officer's eyes widened as he flipped page after page. This says you own. He paused, glancing up. Not just this vineyard, but the entire valley floor. I nodded again. Including the land the HOA was built on. Silence. Karen's face went pale. That's impossible, she whispered. The HOA controls. The officer cut her off. Ma'am, according to this, your HOA exists on land leased from this man's family trust. Her mouth opened. Closed. Another officer walked back, shaking his head. This irrigation channel? It's registered historic agricultural infrastructure. Tampering with it would be a felony. The first officer closed the folder. Sir, he said, straightening, it appears you are fully compliant. In fact, he turned to Karen, it appears your HOA may be in violation. Karen didn't scream. She didn't argue at first. She froze. Her confident posture collapsed into something brittle, like glass waiting to shatter. The smug smile she'd worn since stepping out of the patrol car drained from her face as the officer slowly turned the folder toward her. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "are you aware that this documentation places the majority of Silvercrest Valley under this man's ownership?" Karen blinked hard. Once. Twice. That can't be right," she stammered. "Our developer assured us." The officer raised a hand, calm but firm. "Developers don't override recorded land deeds." Another officer stepped closer, pointing to a map page spread across the hood of the cruiser. "These boundary lines? They don't stop at the Vineyard fence. They run straight through your HOA subdivision." The wind rustled the vines behind us. Somewhere, a tractor engine hummed in the distance. Steady and patient like it had been listening the whole time, Karen shook her head violently. "No. Our HOA governs all adjacent land use. We have bylaws, easements, restrictions." I crossed my arms, leaning against my truck. "You govern beige fences and mailbox height?" I said calmly. "Not valleys." One of the officers coughed, hiding a laugh. Karen spun toward me. "You deliberately hid this." I raised an eyebrow. "You never asked who owned the land? You just sent threats." The tall officer flipped another page. His tone changed, more serious now. "Ma'am, these water rights date back to 1948. Your HOA's complaint alleges illegal diversion. That's a serious accusation." Karen swallowed. "We were responding to resident concerns by calling the police." "Yes," she hesitated. "Multiple times," another officer added, checking his tablet. "This isn't the first report you filed." The silence stretched. I could almost hear the HOA's authority deflating, like air leaking from a punctured balloon. Karen's voice dropped to a whisper. "We were just trying to enforce standards." I stepped forward for the first time. "You tried to shut down a working vineyard because it didn't match your brochure aesthetic." Her eyes flashed with desperation. "You don't understand." The residency officer cut her off. "Ma'am, filing false or misleading police reports is a misdemeanor." Her clipboard slipped from her fingers, hitting the dirt with a dull thud. Paper scattered across the road, complaint logs, photos of my tractors, printed screenshots from Google Maps, like they were evidence of a crime. One officer bent down, picked up a page, and read aloud. "Agricultural noise before acceptable. HOA hours." He looked up, incredulous. "It's a vineyard." Karen's shoulders slumped. Another officer returned from inspecting the irrigation channel, wiping his hands. "That stonework is registered historic agricultural infrastructure. Tampering with it could trigger state-level penalties." Karen's head snapped up. "Historic," I nodded. "My grandfather laid those stones by hand." The officer turned to her. "Your HOA sent notices, threatening removal." Her lips trembled. "We didn't know." "That's not a defense," he replied. 12 minutes had passed since the cruisers arrived. 12 minutes since Karen had pointed at me like I was a criminal. As she looked small, cornered, exposed. The tall officer spoke into his radio. "Dispatch, cancel the complaint. No violation found. Property owner is in full compliance." He paused, then added, "Potential false reporting by HOA representative." Karen gasped. "You can't do that." He met her eyes. "We already did." Her confidence cracked completely. "This will ruin us," she whispered. "The residents," I shrugged. "You should have checked who owned the valley before trying to control it." She turned toward me, anger flaring through panic. "You let us build here." I laughed, one short and humorless. "I didn't stop you." Big difference. The officer closed the folder and handed it back to me with a nod of respect. "Sir, you're well within your rights." Then he looked at Karen. "But your HOA may not be." Karen sank onto the bumper of her SUV, staring at the ground as if it had betrayed her. One officer lingered, his tone softening. "Ma'am, this should have been handled as a civil zoning inquiry, not harassment. I was doing my job," she murmured. "No," he said. "You were overstepping." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of soil and leaves. The valley didn't care about bylaws. It never had. As the officers prepared to leave, the tall one turned back to me. "Sir, would you like to file a formal complaint regarding harassment or trespass?" Karen's head snapped up, her eyes. I thought about the drones buzzing over my vines. The notices taped to my gate. The workers intimidated the threats, masked as compliance. I smiled. "Yes," I said I would. Karen closed her eyes. The officers nodded, already noting details. When they drove away, the road was quiet again. Just me, the vineyard, and a former HOA tyrant sitting in the dirt, realizing she'd tried to police land that remembered owners long before her rules ever existed. And for the first time since Silvercrest Hills was built, the valley remembered. Everyone exactly who had belonged to the valley didn't change overnight. It didn't need to. Power never rushes. It waits out in the weeks after the police visit. The silence from the Silvercrest Hills HOA was louder than any tractor I'd ever run. No emails, no compliance letters, no clipboards hovering at my gate like vultures. Even the drones once So, bold dade buzzed the treetops like mechanical mosquitoes. Explanation. But silence doesn't mean peace. It means fear is reorganizing. The first sign came 3 days later, when a certified letter arrived at my house. Thick envelope, legal tone, carefully worded apology buried beneath paragraphs of misunderstanding, and procedural error. They wanted a meeting. I forwarded the letter to my attorney and went back to pruning vines. The second sign came from the county doc. An inspector I'd known for years stopped by unannounced, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. He'd received an inquiry from the HOA about jurisdiction clarification. When he reviewed the land records himself, he laughed. They really didn't know, he said. Did they? No, I replied. They never ask. They just demand. That same week, Silvercrest Hills canceled its monthly board meeting. The agenda disappeared from the community portal. Residents started asking questions in online forums. Questions turned into speculation. Speculation turned into panic. Because once an HOA loses the illusion of authority, it loses everything. 2 weeks later, the lawsuit landed. Not from me, from the county. The HOA had issued citations, levied fines, and filed police reports for activities beyond its legal boundaries. They've exposed them to regulatory violations, civil liability, and in one particularly satisfying twist, historical preservation violations. Tied to my irrigation system, their lawyers called mine within hours. They wanted to settle. The negotiations were short and ugly. The HOA agreed to withdraw every citation ever issued against my vineyard. They paid fines to the county. They issued a formal written apology acknowledging my land rights, water rights, and agricultural exemptions. They rewrote their bylaws to explicitly exclude all agricultural and historical properties within Silvercrest Valley, and Karen resigned effective immediately. No farewell email, no thank you post. Just gone. Her name disappeared from the HOA website like it had never been there. Residents noticed. The next HOA election was chaos. Board members resigned mid-term. Meetings turned into shouting matches. People demanded to know how an association, bold enough to call the police on a vineyard, could be so legally clueless. One resident reportedly stood up and asked, if they didn't know who owned the valley, what else don't they know? No one had an answer. Meanwhile, harvest season arrived. The valley came alive, the way it always had, workers moving in practiced rhythm. Crates filling with grapes heavy from the sun, laughter echoing between rows. Trucks rolled in and out. The old irrigation channel flowed like it had for generations. No one complained, or rather they didn't dare. Sometimes I'd catch homeowners standing at the edge of their backyards, staring down at the vineyard. The same vineyard they had once tried to silence. The same land their HOA had treated like an inconvenience. Only now, they understood something. They didn't live next to a vineyard. They lived inside. A valley. And valleys don't bend to committees. One afternoon, I spotted a familiar face at the ridge. One of the former HOA board members. He didn't approach. Just stood there, hands in pockets, watching the harvest like someone realizing they'd moved into a story much older than themselves. Nodded when he saw me. I nodded back. That was enough. The county finalized the settlement by the end of the month. The case never went to court, but the record remained public, permanent. Developers took notice, so did other HOAs. Word travels fast in rural communities, and faster still when arrogance gets humbled. The story spread not with my name attached, but with a warning: check the land before you try to control it. A month later, I received an unexpected request from the HOA. They wanted permission to place a small sign near the community entrance acknowledging the vineyard as a historic agricultural landmark. I laughed for a full minute before agreeing. The sign went up quietly. No ceremony, no speeches, just a plaque near the road, weathered bronze, etched with dates that predated the subdivision by nearly 70 years. The valley didn't need validation, but the HOA did. On the anniversary of the police visit, I walked the ridge at sunset. The light poured over the vines, turning the valley gold. The houses on the hills looked small, from up there delicate, like they were borrowing space rather than owning it, which in a way, they were. I thought about Karen, about clipboards, and threats and authority borrowed from paper rules. I wondered if she'd learned anything. Then I let the thought go, because the valley already had land. Remembers it. Remembers who respects it and who tries to dominate it. And every morning, when the sun rises over Silvercrest Valley, it does so on its own terms. No HOA approval required.